Oh, you guys got me. Yeah, on Facebook I had a poll going up that was up between this band and the Heart Machine to find out which of these album reviews would be posted first and be the first one posted from the new, very incomplete studio. And well, this one won. However, the Heart Machine's video was recorded first, so obviously there's going to be a lot of mentioning of firsts in that video, so there's your explanation. While you're going to see this video first, the next video is going to have a lot of the word first in it, so that's probably just creating more confusion, but it's also going to clear it up once the other one is put up. So, what's the album that won? Well, it's in the description box. It's up there in the title, so if you clicked on it, you know already. The DETHALBUM 3, of course, by Dethklok, which is the band, in case you don't know, it's the band that is featured on the Adult Swim show Metalocalypse. Now, with the DETHALBUM 3, if you've listened to the DETHALBUM 1 and 2, you're not really getting much in the way of a new idea that's going behind this. Now, perhaps there is a little bit of a blend here as opposed to in years past where there has been that blend, but there's been a little bit more of a focus maybe toward the hokey side as opposed to the serious side. With the DETHALBUM 3, there is certainly one of there is the hokey songs, the kind of silly songs on there, such as I Ejaculate Fire, the very first track that is on this album. Because, let's face it, that is kind of funny. Because if you're ejaculating fire, either A, you're in a lot of pain, or B, you might be the best porn star ever. But, at any rate, there's also, on the other end of the spectrum, songs such as Impeach God that definitely have a little bit of relevance to it. And the reason why there's relevance is because of not only the plot line within the show, but also because of the growing number of atheist population here in America and abroad that kind of have this whole little concept going on that perhaps this is something that needs to be done. Or perhaps they themselves have impeached God and instead have opted for a life of godlessness. So the relevance that actually circumvents just being in the show itself and actually into reality is kind of a neat little feature. Probably something, and I would hazard a 90% chance that it is kind of inconsequential that happened and completely coincidental that it occurred. However, whether or not that's the case, that's definitely cool. Now, Dethklok, the band, has certainly been able to do many things with this concept. So, Metalocalypse as a show has certainly grown into a larger empire based around the fact that they've been able to release albums with this fictional band. They've been able to get real musicians in order to come in and fill those roles. Brendan Small has certainly spared us no expense in that regard. And they've even been able to take it on tour. In fact, they were supposed to go on tour with Lamb of God starting in August, I believe. However, that tour got kind of split off. Now Lamb of God is doing their own thing with, I believe it's Hell Yeah and In Flames and Silosis, whereas Dethklok is doing a separate tour. So it's kind of interesting that they've been able to take this act on the road and that they've kind of had to go through all of the traditional problems of going out on the road, such as Randy Blythe getting arrested and facing the fact that he might be in jail for a long time. But yes, the reason why I'm speaking more so about this end is because if you listen to the album, and if you've listened to the first two Dethklok albums, should I say, you're not getting anything all of that new or exciting here on Dethklok 3. It's certainly the same style. And it's all music that's really trying to go along with the plot line of the show, while at the same time having those elements that are sort of inside jokes or inside elements of the show, that if you watch the show, you're going to understand them a little bit better or kind of recall where they're from. I'm talking more so about what the band has been able to do, outside of the show, is mainly because it's kind of a marvel. This is almost like heavy metal's Family Guy in a way, and I know I probably just sinned by saying that. However, it's certainly the case. This is, for metal fans, what Family Guy is to frat boys, teenagers, and adults that probably spend way too much time in smoky lodges than with their children, if that makes any sense. Now, here's where the dynamic kind of shifts a little bit. Metalocalypse and Dethklok with Dethklok 3 definitely have showcased that technical death metal idea that they have, which is more leaning towards the death metal side. The technicality is really just in the solos and in the fact that the music is, it seems like it could turn towards that at any time, but it really just doesn't. And it really teaches more of a lesson to many bands that are kind of in the extreme metal category that's leaning toward technical metal or technical death metal, kind of some do's and don'ts. there's definitely a lot of simplicity here, so they're definitely in a position where they're not trying to overcomplicate things. And I think that bands certainly run into two varying problems whenever it comes to this concept. I think there are some bands that are able to keep things so simple, or want to craft things so simple, that their records become extremely predictable. It's something where they have this idea and this framework in mind, and they just copy it 12 times, and, well, whenever you listen to it, you almost want to stop listening to it after track number 1, because you already know what's going to happen in all the other tracks. It's almost like watching a television show and having the plot be resolved in episode 1, but there still being 11 episodes left. There's a lot of bands out there that are certainly excuse me, guys. A lot of bands that are certainly responsible and certainly guilty of doing this. Now, on the other hand, there are bands that are being overly technical, where that's almost the only thing that they're really showcasing. They're trying to write these complex riffs or these complex time signatures, these complex patterns that would make any person that has just a trace amount of musical knowledge or musical theory knowledge, whenever they're looking at this sheet music, make them want to shit their pants and perhaps just curl up in a corner and, take a bunch of heroin and kill themselves. Yeah, that's also a problem. Now, it's kind of cool to hear it, because whenever it's done correctly, then everything flows very nicely. Take a listen to Autotheism by The Faceless, and you definitely see where this is something where it's done correctly. And one could even say Omnivium by Obscura last year, in 2011. However, for a true dose of technical death metal in that virtuosic style, then The Faceless's album from this year is right up your alley. Now, this is also a problem for some bands, mainly because that's their focal point. Instead of doing it like The Faceless and Obscura, they are focusing completely on the fact that they can showcase just how virtuosic that they are, and really songcraft and everything around it suffers, and the overall work suffers because of that. This kind of is resemblant to Dragon Force, who of course were able to play these mind-bending solos that just really impressed a lot of people, but they couldn't replicate it live, so you don't want to make something too overtly technical that you're not going to be able to replicate it live. While at the same time, you also want to have songcraft in there. That way your record doesn't sound like just a bunch of arpeggios that are paged together with a bunch of random transitions that make no sense. Take a listen to an instrumental record such as Animals as Leaders, and you can definitely see where this is done pretty right. Anyway, back to Dethklok. I know I just went on a huge tangent, but if you like Death Album 1 and Death Album 2, Death Album 3 is going to be right up your alley, because it's nothing all that different. But at the same time, it's certainly something where the music is new. It's stuff where if you watch the show religiously, you're going to recognize exactly where they came from. You might even be able to pinpoint the episode number. So it's kind of a cool little idea for true fans. For those people who are looking for this album to be like the album of the year or something like that, that it certainly is not. It's just an album of kind of run-of-the-mill death metal that has a technical side to it. But for what it's worth, they're able to do it better than a lot of bands in the genre are able to do it, especially up-and-comers that are kind of leaning a little bit more towards that deathcore side. Yeah, that D word sucks. I really don't like to use it very much. But I'll say it 3 times right now and just get it out of the way, kind of christen a new place with it. Deathcore, deathcore, deathcore. Death Album, though, good stuff. So I would probably give this a 7.5 out or an 8. Sounds like a low score, but let's face it, it's run-of-the-mill. Not to mention, if you've heard the first 2 records, there's no real evolution, mainly because there doesn't have to be.